that might be firing for a larger goal. For example, let me show you here. So the TOTE. So a TOTE about what this course will mean. So you have certain outcomes. I'll use our word for it, but understand that that's what they meant. There's certain outcomes, test. And you go, have I got these yet? And you go, no, I haven't. So the test was negative. So you're comparing to, do I have what I came here to get yet? And the answer is no. So then you go into a series of steps, ask questions, get more class time, bother the instructor on breaks. I mean, other ways in which you are attempting to get this outcome. At a certain point, you go back into, and again, remember there's an artifice here. It isn't as if there's two boxes because there's only one cell, but it's a model. You go back into the outcomes again, and are you getting this goal? If you are, then you might go on to chat with your neighbors, go to lunch. In other words, as in the words of the poet Deborah Holland, when our ships come in, we shall be overjoyed. Count all our blessings and dream of another place. Right? We are teleological, goal-driven creatures. And when we've satisfied lunch, we get on with life. Now, Ron, to answer your question, what's down in here? Well, you could say the VAKs are down in here, which is right. You could also say that there's more totes. That is that there's a smaller tote. And inside those, there's even smaller totes till you get down to those Now, this suggests something else that they didn't have words for back in the original NLP, which is that a number of NLP models are what is called fractal. Fractal is simply the idea of it's self-similarity of form with invariance to scale. That's the mathematical definition. What that means, you go outside and you look at a pine tree, and you pick off a branch of the pine tree and you hold it up, and that little branch of pine tree looks like the branch it was just on, only the big one. And then you step back and you hold it up and it looks like the tree. In other words, it's the same shape. And many of the models in NLP, whether it's the criteria model, whether it's the strategies model, have this self-similarity. That is that you can have a tote for getting lunch, but lunch is not what's driving your life. You can have, having gotten lunch, you then are ready to study in this course. And this course is part of a larger tote called learning. And this tote is about helping you create a certain career possibility or a career for yourself, which is this then becomes one of these in a larger tote called your life direction, your destiny, your purpose. So there's totes inside of totes here, if you will. Each one at each level having an operation, each one at each level having a test. Now, you also need a cue. The cue is, when is it time to run this particular strategy? So when is it time to go find lunch? Well, it might be based on the time later today. It might be based on your stomach. They now know that when we see posters of foods, these are called billboards, or television commercials, our body literally begins to release exactly the enzymes and amino acids necessary to digest what we're seeing. Yeah, we're a pretty well-organized system, except that we never thought they'd invent something called television. Our brains never didn't know about that. So there's lots of ways in which the body, either internally or externally, can cue, now it's time to go do this strategy. And of course, you want to know when to exit a strategy and go on. In other words, you don't just, some people, by the way, don't have this. We've seen them, you know. They've got a big problem, right? Because they don't have a cue as to, stop eating. You've satisfied this strategy. Some people have this in other parts of life. They ask Rockefeller, the original Rockefeller, how much money is enough? And he turned to his interviewer and he said, more. Well, it's somebody who didn't really have an exit for their strategy. Now, on the other hand, there are other people that you can mention in the area of finance who have huge fortunes for whom it's a great deal of fun, right? That they go, wow, a new project, a new thing to do. So it's not about good or bad about these. It's about, do you have a way in which that you know that you got what you wanted? Give you the downside of this. I work, as a number of you know, with financial decision makers, some of them quite good at what they do, some of them not so good. And some of the younger traders, they want to go into the business and they want to make $1 million. That's their test. And they're doing all this stuff, and often they're doing it really well and working hard, but their tote is so large that they exhaust themselves before they ever get there. Because they won't reward themselves, they won't exit until they get to the million. As opposed to having a smaller tote saying, set up my own office, be an independent business person. Have smaller totes that let them know they're having success, that are building towards this larger one. Now, once again, this isn't really how neurons work. In fact, the opposite side of this, which I've indicated in previous work on metaprograms, is what we could call embodied sensory-based. That is that these processes really don't work this way. That we have a body, we have eyes in front of our head, that we look forward to things, and there's all this other linguistic evidence that has nothing to do with the formalism of this model. So we're working with multiple models, something I hope I've made clear previously. Using this abstract model of strategies, though, we get certain insights into experience, and we get the ability to do certain things. For example, one of the real contributions Grinder and Bandler made to this work was, what are these steps made of? How do we know that we've got an outcome? Well, we say, what will you see, what will you hear, what will you feel, that let you know you got what you wanted. Whew. That's why Gregory Bateson wrote the introduction to Structure of Magic Book 1. It was one of those things where, duh, right in front of them, they'd been looking at communication theory for years and years for a way to ground this theory, and it never occurred to them that it could be the representational systems. Never occurred to them. As I was saying, that strategies binds many different kinds of models together. Right under the rep system, of course, it binds the submodalities. They found Bandler one day standing in front of these V's, A's, and K's. They go, Richard, it's cocktail hour. Come on. We got a cool one waiting for you. Richard's looking, goes, Richard, what are you looking at? He says, I want to know what's in the arrows. Well, this really comes to our experience. This comes to our work. This is what sets us apart. We want to know what's in it. How do you get from one experience to the other? And what did they find? So I previously noted that there's three kinds of strategies. That fit together. Decision, motivation, conviction, or conviction, decision, motivation, or motivation, conviction, decision. And that they tend to be wrapped around each other, and that these are three in particular to pay attention to. And that each utilizes the TOTE in a different way. That the decision strategy creates options in the operation and then divides those options in the test. In other words, which one is most viable. With motivation, the operation is creating more and more impetus to go into action, either by moving towards or away, thank you, moving towards or away, either by an analog process or a digital ratcheting up in one of the rep systems. So when the picture gets bright enough, when the picture gets close enough or the sound gets loud enough, one takes action. Or counterwise, when the feeling is uncomfortable enough or good enough, boom, into action. Convincer strategies, take the operation as a counter, as a way of determining the number of examples that meet criteria that will allow the person to form, as I said, a generalization, a belief. So that it can be that this is a good restaurant, this is a trustworthy person, this is good value, these are the kind of people I have to hang out with, these are the kind of people you can't trust. Any one of those is run by running the operation a number of times or for a certain duration that you've built up a number of examples or a sufficient period of time that you exit to a generalization. All of them using test, operate, test, exit. All of them needing a cue, an exit, criteria, representational systems, submodalities. So, I want to do a quick demonstration here.